Thank you. Good afternoon. Welcome and thank you for joining us today for the NASA and SpaceX Crew-5 Post-Flight Readiness Review teleconference from NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida. I'm Brittany Thorpe with NASA's Office of Communications. As a note for today, our telecon will end at 6 p.m. Eastern Time for dark coverage. NASA and SpaceX continue to target no earlier than 12:46 p.m. Eastern Time, Monday, October 3rd, for launch of the agency's Crew-5 mission to the International Space Station from NASA's Kennedy Space Center. The mission will carry NASA astronauts Nicole, Mann and Josh Cassada, who will serve as mission commander and pilot, respectively, along with JAXA astronaut Koichi Wakata and Roscosmos cosmonaut Anna Kikina, who will serve as mission specialist. These crewmates will travel to the space station for a 6-month science and technology research mission. Plans also continue for NASA's SpaceX Crew-4 astronauts return following a short handover on space station with Crew-5. Teams from NASA and SpaceX just completed the flight readiness review for the mission. Senior representatives here to talk more about this important review are Catherine Leaders, Associate Administrator, Space Operations Mission Directorate, NASA Headquarters; Kelvin Manning, Deputy Director, Kennedy Space Center; Steve Stitch, Commercial Crew Program, NASA Kennedy Space Center; Joel Montalbano, Manager, International Space Station, NASA's Johnson Space Center; Emily Nelson, Chief Flight Director, Flight Operations Directorate, NASA Johnson Space Center; William Gerstenmaier, Vice President, Build and Flight Reliability with SpaceX; and Junichi Sakai, International Space Station Program with JAXA. We will begin with opening comments from our speakers and then open it for questions. To get the questions into the queue, please press *1 on your phone. About an hour after we conclude, you can listen to a replay of this teleconference online. Kathy?
So obviously this is a super busy time. We're wedging in a press conference in between flight readiness reviews and dark coverage, so you can get a sense of how busy this is. The team met today. We had to do it a little bit differently just because of weather issues, so we had actually a remote flight readiness review from multiple centers, but we met again and did a thorough review for what is once again an international launch with Nicole, Josh, Koichi, and Anna. All of our international partners participated in the meeting, and normally we'd have, both representatives of JAXA and Roscosmos here, but I think it's about 2:30. Joel can correct me in the morning for Sergey, so we let him off. And so, but as we're getting ready for the mission, we'll be including our Roscosmos representatives in our press conferences. We had a very good and thorough review today. There's only there's 2 remaining, I would say, issues that are out there, but they're coming to the board tomorrow. So really, I would characterize it right now as their package. We talked about them today, but Steve Stitch, the Commercial Crew Program Manager, has to do final risk buy-off tomorrow at this board, and he can, and Bill Gerstenmaier can give you a little bit more information about that. Our biggest discussion today was probably regarding weather and timing, and the team's still working towards the October 3rd launch time frame, but we also know that we've got to work through weather conditions here at KSC, and work through timing of the events, which is why we have a special guest today, Kelvin Manning, and I will hand it over to him.
Thanks, Kathy. And being in Florida, we're no stranger to hurricanes, so we've been closely tracking Hurricane Ian, who was designated as a Cat 1 hurricane last night. So this morning, our KSC emergency decision team met and at 9 a.m. declared a Hurricane Condition 4, which kicks off our hurricane preps, anticipating the arrival of winds 50 knots, that's 58 miles per hour or greater, 72 hours. so I'll stop there and pass it on to Steve Stitch, our Commercial Crew Program Manager. Steve?
Hey, thank you, Kelvin. We did have a good flight readiness review today. We went through a very thorough review of lots of different parts of the vehicles, including the status on the parachutes, the heat shield, the transport damage for booster 1077. I thought it was a very thorough review. We are still on track for the launch on October 3rd. That launch time would be 12:45 p.m. Eastern. And we have actually 3 days in a row right now. So we have October 3rd, 4th, and 5th set up. And we'll be working hand in hand with Kelvin Manning and Janet Petro and the KSC Center as they prepare for the arrival of Hurricane Ian and the tropical storm winds. And then we'll watch carefully as the center prepares for the storm and takes various things down. And then we'll look at that very carefully when we decide what to do relative to the actual launch date. Coming out of the FRR, we had just a couple of open items that we needed to go take care of. The vehicle hardware is doing well. Dragon has made it to Falcon 9. There's no issues with the hardware on the vehicle. One area that we need to close out at the program control board tomorrow is for a weld on a composite overwrap pressure vessel on Falcon 9. The welds were done a little differently than they have been done in the past, and the SpaceX team is off replicating exactly how those welds were done. We'll go test those welds and make sure that we're good to go proceed toward flight. I think this is just an abundance of caution on the SpaceX team, and kudos to them for identifying it. And then we have another area on the mud flap. It's an area around the perimeter of the spacecraft that we have some areas where it bonds to the composite. We want to go make sure and check the margins and bring that to the board tomorrow just to make sure we're good to go fly. This time we'll be flying a brand new Falcon 9 booster, booster 1077. The Dragon Endurance spacecraft previously flew on Crew-5, and so we're excited to have that vehicle fly again. I can't thank the NASA and SpaceX team enough for all the hard work in preparing for the flight, getting through the reused items on the vehicle, and getting ready to go move forward with the flight. And we'll take our time to work through the weather with the hurricane like we always do. These are very disciplined decisions that we are used to making, and then we'll work hand in hand with the Kennedy Space Center to see that how the center fares, and then at the right time we'll bring the crew in, we'll roll the vehicle out, and we'll get ready to go launch. And I'll turn it over to my good friend Joel Montalbano.
Hey, thanks, Steve, and thank you again for joining us. Today's 9+ hour flight readiness review summarizes all the work that's been performed for months with the different teams. And excellent review, as you heard from Kathy and Steve, and we're looking forward to this mission. Onboard Space Station, we continue to be busy. Just the last week, as most of you are aware, we had a good launch and docking of the Soyuz spacecraft. They are performing handover activities, and on Thursday the 29th, just after 2:30 a.m. Central Time, the Soyuz that's currently been up there, that crew will come home, and they'll have been in orbit about 195 days. This Crew-5 vehicle will dock to the forward port of the Harmony module. The crew member during the expedition will complete over 200 investigations in human research and technology demonstration that'll help us leave low Earth orbit and continue our exploration, as well as low Earth orbit commercialization activities. The crew will stay docked to the space station for about 5 months. Right now we're looking at about 145 days or so, and the teams are working that, and as we continue through the expedition, we'll refine that date. The handover will be just about 5 days, and that's driven by our science requirements. And so the Crew-4, the Crew-5 handover, like I said, 5 days. And again, once we get on orbit and docked, the team will be refining the landing day and time. With that, let me hand it over to the Chief of the Flight Directors, Emily Nelson.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Joel. Nicole and Josh, Anna, and Koichi are all doing well. They're eager to get to the Cape and get ready for launch as soon as the weather allows. Meanwhile, Chell, Bob, Jessica, and Sam are continuing their mission on board. They'll begin their preparations for return this week, and when the time is right, we'll be able to get them back home and to their families. With that, I'm going to hand it over to SpaceX's Bill Gerstenmaier.
Again, I think we had a very thorough review today. The Dragon came over to 39A hangar very clean with the least amount of work. We normally carry some work into the hangar, but it was the least amount of work we've ever carried over into the hangar. So that was really good. The vehicle's safe there. It's mated, as Steve said. We're ready to roll out whenever the weather is ready to go roll out. We don't want to roll out and end up in high winds and rain, and we've got the right criteria. We shared that with NASA and with the Kennedy Space Center, so they know what our constraints are. We've been flying a lot of missions, a lot of Starlink missions. I think that really helps the crew program. We learn a lot on those missions, and we can carry that learning directly into crew missions. But I will tell you, crew missions are special. They are very different to us. They are not routine in any way, shape, or form. We treat these missions with more respect than any missions we fly. We know our responsibility. We know what we need to do. We'll work with the teams here. We'll be ready to support in any way we can. We'll watch the weather. We won't get distracted by the weather. We'll be ready to fly when the team is ready to go fly and the weather allows us to go fly. I'll hand it over to JAXA.
Thank you for introductions. My name is Sakai Junichi, the ISS Program Manager of JAXA. First of all, on behalf of JAXA, I would like to sincerely thank the NASA leadership, SpaceX, our international partners, Roscosmos, ESA, CISA, and all the members on the ground who worked so hard for the Crew-5 launch operation and the continuing ISS operation under such new normal situation against COVID, but still tough. As reported earlier in FRL, we have decided to go for the Crew-5 launch and Crew-4 return with some tracking items. JAXA, including astronaut Wakata Koichi, are already for that. Making the most of his matured experience in space for his past 4 flights, astronaut Wakata Koichi will lead, cooperate, and succeed in a variety of missions with his American and Russian colleague astronaut and cosmonaut. I'm looking forward to this coming launch and will continue final preparations. Thank you.
Thank you all, and I want to hand it back to Kathy for just a moment for one more comment.
At the end.
At the end, okay. All right. As a reminder, to ensure as many people as possible get the opportunity to ask their question, please ask only one question per person. Please do state your name, affiliation, and to whom you're directing your question. Our first question is Bill Harwood with CBS News.
Hey guys, thanks a lot for doing this on such a busy day. One question for Steve Stitcher, Gerst, or both. Can we get an update on where things stand with the Super Heavy Starship pad at 39A and whether crew access is going to have to be provided at pad 40? I mean, can we get an idea of what's going on in that arena? Thanks.
Yeah, I can start, and then we'll let Bill add in, Bill. So we are continuing to follow the activities at pad 39A relative to Starship. In fact, we actually talked at the FRR about 3 areas that were cut in to our pad that we launch off of for the crewed flights on Dragon and F9. We are looking at options to have a crew capability at 40, and we'll start likely with a cargo capability. SpaceX is laying out a plan to go outfit a pad 40 for crew and cargo, and that work is transpiring, and we're following that in commercial crew program. And I'll hand it over to Bill and see what he wants to add.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. We're already started the work to begin the preparation for pad 40. We've actually ordered some hardware, put some contract stuff in place, and we're ready to go have a crew capability at pad 40. Our intent is to bring Starship to 39A after we have a reliable vehicle, and we'll do a series of tests down in Boca, make sure the vehicle's ready to go, and when we think we've got a very good and reliable vehicle, then we'll bring it to 39A and launch. And we think the Cape is a great place for us to do operational deployments of Starlink satellites in the future, and that's our intent to be there. But the focus clearly is to support crews, support our primary mission, and then we'll add in the Starship activity at the appropriate time.
Thank you. Our next question is Eric Berger with Ars Technica.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for doing this, and good luck to everyone in Florida over the next week or so. Question for Kathy. Can you discuss what it's been like working with Roscosmos during the time that Yuri Borisov has been leading the corporation? It does seem like the relationship has been a little more stable. You've got a Russian crew member, obviously, on this flight. But maybe just talk about sort of where that relationship is these days.
Well, I think I'm going to jump in, and then I'll have Joel add, because he was just over there for the Soyuz launch. But I think, we've continued to appreciate that we've had a very professional relationship with our Russian colleagues, and have appreciated Mr. Borisov's show of support with the team, and obviously supporting our flying Anna, and he also flew Frank for us. And so when you each are flying each other's crew members, you know that you have a huge responsibility that you're promising to the other countries to be able to ensure that you're flying their crew members safely. And so I know that we still have things to work through, but at a working level, we've really appreciated the constancy in the relationship, even during some really, really tough times geopolitically. And Joel, I don't know if you want to add anything else.
I'll just add that, as expected, we were able to interface with Mr. Borisov during the launch campaign. He made it very clear that Roscosmos is committed to meeting all their international commitments. He made it also very clear that they're ready to continue supporting the integrated crew. As you know, we agreed to 3 missions, one in 22, one in 23, and one in 24. But all in all, just excellent support from Roscosmos during this last launch campaign, and we expect it to continue.
Thanks. Our next question is Marcia Smith from Space Policy Online.
Thanks so much. This may be for Mr. Manning. I'm curious about what one can do or not do under HERCON 4. Are there certain activities that are prohibited during that time, and what are the criteria for moving up to HERCON 3, and do you anticipate that happening? And when can the crew come, for example? Do you need certain conditions before the crew's allowed to fly in?
Hi, Marcia. Well, I'll talk first about HERCON 4. So what we're doing our basic preparations. So if we have a significant storm, then we will have a ride-out team. You've heard of that before. And so in HERCON 4, we're doing things like preparing the ride-out kits. So cots, blankets, making sure all the flashlights have batteries, making sure our generators are fueled, cars are fueled, and put in the right position in case, we have a scenario where we need to utilize specific vehicles. HERCON 3 is going to depend on the arrival of those 50-knot winds or 58 miles per hour, 48 hours out. So we might get there tomorrow. We'll decide in the morning and see where we get. But primarily, 3 is where we do the most preparations. 4 is posturing for the hurricane. Those other decisions, your question about the crew, that's something that Stitch could answer.
Yeah. Thanks, Kelvin. I think the criteria for bringing the crew down would be: are we really ready to go roll the vehicle out to the pad, which we need the vehicle out at the pad to bring the crew down and do what we call a dry dress, where we take them through that whole protocol of the morning of launch, getting into their suits, the transportation out to the vehicle. They get in the vehicle, they're able to check the vehicle out, rotate the seats, and do all those activities. And so, it's really twofold. Is the center ready to support getting the vehicle out to the pad, and then is the pad and all the services required to support the vehicle to pad there? And so we just have to lay that timeline out as the storm unfolds and watch how Kelvin and the team work through their HERCON preps, what level they go to, and then see what time will support getting the crew there.
All right, thank you. Our next question is Jeff Faust from Space News.
Hey, good afternoon. I wanted to ask, how close to the launch does the crew have to show up? I mean, if they're delayed several days by weather, does that push back the launch? And then are there any constraints on a launch after the 5th? Are there issues either at KSC or at the ISS if you have to launch after the 5th? Thanks.
Yeah, we typically would bring the crew in roughly about 4 days prior to launch for those preparations to get them there, get them into crew quarters. They'll do some training while they're there, go through the tablets that they have some procedures on. As I said, we'll go out to the vehicle and get in and do this practice for launch countdown. We really have those 3 days that I talked about, the 3rd, the 4th, and the 5th of October. The October 6th would not be a good day. It's just not a good day from a trajectory standpoint to rendezvous and dock to the ISS. And then it picks up after that with another sequence of 7, 8, 9. So we're in really good shape with opportunities. And then we would, we'll just make decisions as the weather unfolds and see how, the Kennedy Space Center is riding out the storm. And do we have personnel available and ready based on how the storm unfolds?
And then from an ISS standpoint, we can absolutely accommodate the 3, 4, 5, and then the 7, 8, 9 with no issues. And we can even go further than that if required.
And from a SpaceX standpoint, we typically roll out probably around noon on the 29th if the crew flies down. So you could think about the crew flying in, us rolling out the pad, then dry dress the next day, and then a couple days until the launch on the 3rd.
So our next question is Mika Maidenberg from the Wall Street Journal.
Yeah, hi there. Hey, Bill, Steve mentioned some welds that were conducted differently, for this Falcon 9. Could you explain why SpaceX made that change, to do those welds differently, assuming the company did so? Like, what do you get out of that new technique, I guess? Thanks.
Yeah, they weren't really done differently. We have a certain criteria of when we do a weld. Sometimes they don't get perfectly done, and we do an inspection, and then we do a repair over that. So we have a number of repairs that we're allowed to go do before we say a bottle is not ready to go fly. We didn't actually find this on any of the Crew-5 bottles that are in the vehicle. We found it in another vehicle that we're preparing that we had done maybe an extra weld pass. So what we want to do is make sure that even these bottles were done by some of the same techniques, same technicians, same personnel. So it could possibly be on this vehicle, but we want to make double sure that there's not a concern. So this is a weld repair. It was, I would say, a non-standard weld repair. We've tested it already once, and it looks like it's satisfactory. We're going to review that data with NASA tomorrow. They'll take a look at it, double-check our work, make sure it's okay. We've actually flown it in some other cases on some other rockets, and it's performed well, but that doesn't mean it's good enough for crew. We're going to make Doc sure it's really right. So I would say this is like a extra caution that we're going forward with to just make sure that we're flying the best hardware we can for crew.
And really, I think what's really good is that the team does this exhaustive process of evaluating all their hardware and making sure and understanding everything. And so this is really, to me, a last part of this last check on the vehicle prior to going into, final flight readiness. And so that's what's kind of driving these last two things to be a little bit late in the closeout. But the team's always checking, right, on both sides. And so that's really, really important when you're getting ready for a crewed flight.
Kudos to the SpaceX team. This is Steve Stitch. I mean, they went in and already replicated exactly how the extra weld pass was done on a very similar piece of hardware. They put it through the same kind of ATP or acceptance testing that we would do prior to flight. They put it through 20 cycles, which is the maximum that hardware could actually see. and it passed us fine. And we're going to do a couple more of these before flight, and just make sure that we're safe to go fly.
Thanks all. As a reminder, if you have a question, press *1 to get into the question queue. Our next question is Jamie Groh with Florida Today.
Hi, thank you for doing this. I'm just wondering more about the preparations that are going to happen under Huracan 3 at Kennedy Space Center. So I guess my question would be for Mr. Manning. Also, are you guys kind of working in step with the Space Force station nearby with Space Launch Delta 45? How are those kind of preparations going? Thanks.
Hey, Jamie, I'll answer the second part of your question. Yeah, we're tied at the hip with our partners in Space Launch Delta 45. We have regular conversations with our counterparts. But for the specifics, what we're doing, we're securing facilities, property, and equipment. You know, any kind of construction sites, we want to make sure that things are pinned down. We're briefing that ride-out team to make sure that they know and have what they need. They'll have the ability to go home and prepare their houses and stuff, and then return to the work site in case they have to ride out the storm. And that would happen in Huracan 1, where we would close the center. Other things, anywhere where you would anticipate any kind of water intrusion, you know, we'll cover things up, button them up, put sandbags down, put shutters up. That all happens in Huracan 3.
Thank you. Next question is Stephen Clark with Spaceflight Now.
Thank you. I think I'm going to follow up on Bill Harwood's question about outfitting Pad 40 for crew and cargo. I think for Gerst, is it a done deal that you're going to be going forward with this, or is this still under negotiation with NASA? And can you talk about what would be involved in preparing Pad 40 for crew and cargo, what kind of a construction, and then when it would be ready to support those crew and cargo missions? Thanks.
We've agreed with NASA to do the work, and later I can give you the detailed plans, but they're in work, and they'll be ready before we commence any kind of Starship activities. And we'll do, like it was discussed, we'll do cargo first. We can do that fairly easily and get that done, get that some experience with that. It also gives us some flexibility to move some things off of 39A, which helps us balance launches off of both pads, and we'll add crew at the right time.
And from my perspective as Steve Stitch, I mean, we are participating in design reviews. We've had some preliminary design reviews of the various systems required at Pad 40. With SpaceX, we're following along at each step of the way, and we're in lockstep with Bill as we go to build out this capability.
All right, thank you. And we have Eric Berger with Ars Technica.
Hi, thanks again. Just a real quick question on the booster. I know there was an issue in West Texas when I think part of it may have struck an overpass. Just curious if we could get a little more details about what actually happened and what was done to remediate that issue to give you confidence that it's ready to fly. Thanks.
I can start, and then we'll let Bill add to it. So the booster has a couple different configurations as it's been transported. It was not lowered properly for this one bridge on the way to McGregor, Texas for testing. We ended up having to replace a few components. The interstage, which is a composite component which was damaged the most, and that was the part that made contact with the bridge. We went in and inspected lots of different areas, including the top of the LOX tank. We actually did a pressure test and made sure that it was holding pressure just fine. We replaced a number of avionics components in that upper area around that dome area where the contact was made. And then SpaceX did a great job working side by side with our team through the whole thing. We tried to understand what loads could have gone into the rest of the vehicle, shock load across the vehicle. And then, of course, SpaceX takes every stage and puts it through a set of structural tests where they put the loads on it that it would see in flight, including the loading of propellant, and then ultimately they load it with propellant and then test fire that stage. And all that work passed, and we convinced ourselves that we've got a good vehicle to go fly. And let's see if Bill has anything to add.
I think the only other thing I'd add is we also replaced a grid fin and a grid fin actuator. I think it was fortuitous that the event occurred on the way to Texas that allowed us to do all this work in Texas before we did the loading test and before we did the normal static fire. So this rocket went through its normal full-up testing, post all the repairs to make sure that it is really ready to go. We also took some components off, and we actually then looked at the shock loading of some light components to make sure that we have proper margin. We did some extra pressure checks on some valves here at the Cape just to make sure that any of those valves were not damaged by the loading and shock event. So this booster is perfectly ready to go fly.
Thank you all. That was our last question for today. I'm going to hand it back over to Kathy for some final remarks before closing out today's call. Kathy?
So I just wanted to kind of reinforce that, we're going to step through this carefully. We're going to learn what's going on with the weather. I wish Kelvin could control the weather. I'm sure he wishes he could control the weather right now. He'd be a pretty valuable deputy Kennedy Space Center director here. But, we are going to do what's right to be able to protect the hardware, ensure that we can conduct the mission, just like our Artemis 1 team members had to make that same hard decision today and decide to roll back and protect their hardware. We're going to carefully work with the Kennedy Space Center, obviously see what the weather has. Steve and Joel and the teams are going to go look and make sure that the crew's coming down and work with the SpaceX folks to make sure that the vehicle is rolled out at the right time and checked out, and we're going to put everything through its paces. And so you guys are going to have to be a little patient with us because every day we're going to have to see how the hurricane unfolds and then make sure that we're understanding the readiness of the center and all the critical aspects that are going to need to be here and available for us to go fly this mission safely. So more to come, and we'll step through it, and I think the team's doing all the right things to make sure we're looking at the right things and getting ready for the possibility, and we'll do the mission like we always say. We'll do it when it's the right time to do it safely. Thank you. Thanks for being here, and stay on for the dark coverage because we're pretty excited about that mission. Thanks.
Thank you. That's going to wrap things up for us here tonight. If you felt you still have some questions, please feel free to reach out to your public affairs team, and we will help get you those answers. Please follow along with Crew-5 as we get up to our launch date, and go ahead and transition over for our DART impact coverage, which will start airing at 6 p.m. Eastern Time tonight, with the kinetic impact happening about 7:14 p.m. And then there will be a media briefing at Johns Hopkins APL at 8 p.m. Thank you, and have a good evening.
And this concludes today's conference. Thank you for participating. You may disconnect at this time.